All right, welcome back, Ranger fans and Kraken fans. We have a very special crossover edition for you guys here today. This is John Chick with Locked On New York Rangers, joined by Erica Ayala of Locked On Seattle Kraken. And Erica, how are we doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm actually back home in New York at the time of this recording, so having a good time with that. I know the Rangers were just back in town, so I'm really curious to get your thoughts on how the at least my hometown team is doing, and then of course I'll keep you posted on all things Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it here. It's the first crossover that we're doing together. And, the first thing I wanted to ask you, Erica, I mean, with the Kraken this season, obviously a lot more competitive. I know it's still early, but they look a lot better this season than they did last year. I mean, last year, 27, 49, and 6. Not atypical of an expansion team. I mean, I know Vegas had that crazy run, but typically expansion teams in just about every sport are going to struggle. But I mean, if there's anything you can point to as far as like what's different from last year to this year and where they've improved the most, what would that be for the Kraken?
Sure, it's a great question. I think it's very evident that the Seattle Kraken in the offseason, even really at the trade deadline, were looking to get some pieces that would really boon the offense. And so being able to get Andre Burakovsky through free agency and then Oliver Bjorkstrand through a trade are two really big moves that we made. And then if you include the draft, Shane Wright obviously was a big conversation over the summer. I don't think we've necessarily seen him, not necessarily is underselling it. We haven't seen him play to his potential and really get into the mix. And I think there are reasons for sure from my perspective why that has been, but you also know that we were going to have Matty Beniers coming back, and he's been pretty solid for us. So the big changes were that we really focused on were offensive changes. Now the unexpected changes have come in goaltending, which was another area we really needed to improve upon. But over the summer, Chris Drieger, he tore his ACL while playing with Hockey Canada. So that was an injury we knew we were going to have to deal with. We, of course, have Joey Daccord in our system, but we went ahead and got Martin Jones. Flash forward, Martin Jones has been fantastic for the Seattle Kraken, and he wasn't really expected to play as much as he has been because not only do we have Drieger out with an injury, but Philip Grubauer went out with an injury as well. So we have seen some improvements from Grubauer, and we knew we needed that from him. That being said, we're not sure how sustainable that is yet because he's been out with injury. He has been hitting the ice and dressing during practices, so we're expecting to have him back soon. But the big change has been offensively, and then the big surprise as of late has been goaltending by way of Martin Jones.
Yeah, I wanted to specifically ask you about Jones, and obviously, you touched on some of the things that he's done so far this season for you guys. He's had really kind of an interesting career. He got off to a decent start, kind of fell off for a few years, but I checked the stats, and I was very surprised to see just how well he's played for you guys. Is there a chance that I know Grubauer right now is on long-term IR? I mean, is it kind of game on right now as far as who the starting goalie could be once Grubauer gets back into the mix there?
In my mind, yes. Now, Philip Grubauer got injured playing against his former team, the Colorado Avalanche. He played very well in that game. Um, and again, he had been looking better. I wouldn't say I could gauge fully if we were getting the Grubauer that was a Vezina Trophy candidate at one time, or a finalist, I should say. I'm not sure that we saw enough. That being said, looking at what was expected as far as starts from Martin Jones, looking at what Martin Jones has been able to do against us, or with a Seattle Kraken team, I should say, that still has not done enough, in my opinion, on defense. I don't know that we should presume that Philip Grubauer is going to secure between the pipes when he's back healthy for two reasons. One, you got to reward good performance. And Martin Jones has kept the Seattle Kraken in games, even ones we are hell bent on losing, which kind of happened the other night over the weekend. Even in games we are hell bent on losing, Martin Jones has been pretty solid for us. So I do think that we should reward that. There's another part of me, though, that knows he has been putting in a lot of work that he maybe necessarily didn't think he was going to. Similarly to what Philip Grubauer went through last season, where Drieger was in and out of the lineup with injuries. So I don't think we can assume that Grubauer is going to take over as the starting goaltender. I don't know that Martin Jones has done anything where we shouldn't reward him for more play. That being said, we want him to stay healthy for as long as we have him. So if it makes sense to get Grubauer into the rotation a little bit more and give Martin Jones a rest, I'm totally fine with that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another player you touched on briefly there was Andre Burakovsky, and obviously I'm very familiar with him. He played for the Capitals forever. Rangers and Capitals have played each other a million times in the playoffs, so I know a lot about him. Going to ask you about him in just a second, Erica. But first, I think we should let everybody know today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Kraken is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball, soccer, and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And Erica and I would certainly like to thank everybody out there for making Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Kraken your first listen every day. And of course, we are free and available on all platforms. And so, Erica, as I just mentioned, Burakovsky, great pickup, it would seem, for the Kraken, and somebody who again has been part of some deep playoff runs with the Capitals, and somebody that I've seen over the years, play for the Caps. So, just your thoughts. First of all, how did you react when they first signed him, and how has he fit in there for the Kraken, leading the way as far as points are concerned so far this season?
Yeah, well, anytime, excuse me, you can get someone that's just coming off of a cup run, that's not a bad acquisition at all. The Seattle Kraken, if you look at even players like Martin Jones, obviously Burakovsky fits the bill here. Players that know what it means to play in the playoffs and then to win titles. We also saw that the Seattle Kraken focused on that in the off season. So generally speaking, you like that. Anytime you have not only a younger team, but a newer team, brand new, newest team in the league, you need that veteran experience, and you need guys that know what it's like to be there. So in that sense, I liked it. Now, Burakovsky and other players have been extremely excited to come to the Seattle Kraken because they've played under elite level players in the NHL, and they've worked in that system. They've been able to be successful in that system. But there's also a desire and a drive to find out if they can be that guy, that number one guy. And the Seattle Kraken is nothing but a breeding place for opportunity for guys either trying to reestablish their careers, maybe a la Martin Jones, who we talked about, or for young guys like Matty Beniers to really make a name for themselves. And so Burakovsky, I know, has been one of those guys that really wanted to take that opportunity. And I think so far he's done pretty well. In our last game, we saw that he was on that third line, and that more so was as Jared McCann was coming back into the fold and a few other things here and there, just mixing up the lines a little bit. But he's been on that top line with Wenberg centering himself, Burakovsky, and Oliver Bjorkstrand, who we also talked about. And I think Burakovsky has really been the offensive power on that line for the most part. You started to see Wenberg operate, and then Bjorkstrand is, as Allison Lucan might say, he's sneaky good and can really create opportunities. And we see that by way of the assists that he's been able to rack up this season. So I like Andre Burakovsky. I do think, though, that there's still more that we can tap into. We talked about it throughout the week. In that 3-on-3, didn't love his chance there, kind of led to a turnover, and our last loss, which was against the Winnipeg Jets. We talked about that a lot on Locked On Kraken. But, that comes with someone who, again, is trying to establish what their game is going to be like when there's more opportunity. So overall, I'm good with where we are with Burakovsky, and I know that there's more.
Yeah, it's interesting anytime you have a situation like that with Burakovsky. Obviously being on the Caps, he's kind of a complimentary player to, Ovechkin and Backstrom and Carlson, all those guys that have been there forever. And now it's like, yeah, he's, to your point, Erica, he's on the Kraken, and like, you got to be like the best player, one of the best players on this team, and kind of lead the way for some of the younger guys. And that actually kind of leads me nicely into something else I want to ask about a couple of these younger guys on the Kraken, specifically Matty Beniers as well as Shane Wright. And, Beniers obviously goes number 2 a couple seasons ago. Got a little cup of coffee with the Kraken last season, did pretty well. This year, 9 points in his first 16 games. So we'll start with Beniers and then we'll get to Wright. But I mean, what are you seeing from him? And, how are you and Kraken fans overall feeling about, where he is early in his career here?
Beniers is solid. The Seattle Kraken fans really like Beniers. I think as we're speaking, he's kind of plateaued out a little bit, but I'm not worried about it. But he is a hard working guy. He was able to pick up where he left off. He had 10 games for us last season, collected 9 points. He's been able to work with Andre Burakovsky actually a lot early on in that power play. We've seen the power play kind of drop in productivity a little bit. But again, Burakovsky and Beniers, I like that combo when they're able to work together. So we're just hoping, every season's going to have ebb and flows, and he's still young. He's still learning. What I like most about Beniers is that he's really learned to utilize his weight. He put on a lot of weight in the offseason. He talked about that a lot, but he's also been able to manipulate his size, even when he's going up against, bigger, taller, stronger, more veteran guys on the ice. And that to me shows that he's just a lifelong learner, as I talk about on the show a lot. And, he can make those adjustments. And so, although, we got a little bit spoiled, getting him at, essentially at least a point a game early on as we were on that run, even before really our full on 5-game win streak, longest in franchise history, for as long as that lasted. We weren't seeing as much from Beniers. But again, I'm not worried about it. And then you mentioned Shane Wright, and I alluded to this. We haven't seen him too much in the roster. That has been something I'm exhausted talking about so much, just because even national news is picking it up. What I'll say for my part is the Seattle Kraken have leveled out a little bit, but we didn't start well. We didn't look to be a team that kind of understood or knew the systems, to use a pop culture term. We did not understand the assignment coming out the gate, and so I, for one, didn't necessarily want to see a rookie being put into a system where even veteran guys were not owning that system yet. And then you have players like Daniel Sprong or Ryan Donato. And then, oh my goodness, Morgan Geekie has really come alive. So when those guys are playing well and they are kind of in that healthy scratch rotation, are you going to give up time for where those guys are really making the most of their third line, fourth line minutes for Shane Wright, who, when he is in games, it's not that he's making mistakes. He's looking solid. That being said, there are other players that are finding ways to impact the game on a more consistent basis. So I think that's where we're at. Shane Wright has gone on the record. His family has gone on the record saying they're all in on the Seattle Kraken. So I'm not exactly sure where all the drama is coming from, except people being impatient, which is understandable. But the Seattle Kraken franchise is nothing if not a waiting game right now. And so, John, you probably experienced this, right? As a Rangers fan. Again, I'm from New York, so even though I didn't follow the Rangers as closely, I know enough to know a thing or two about the Rangers, and definitely about young talent coming in. I think there's, at least 2 players that I can think off the top of my head that maybe similarly to Beniers and Wright are kind of glued together and coming up around the same time, but have really shown that they have different paths when it comes to their development on the ice. And I think that has helped the Rangers, and we saw them in the postseason. So what can you tell about this blending of young talent and some more veteran leaders who've been around the league to then create a playoff run as the Rangers have?
Yeah, it was an interesting blend of, veterans and young guys last season. And the 2 young guys, I'm assuming you must be talking about Lafreniere and Kakko. And believe it or not, that comes up quite a bit in these crossover episodes. And, if you just kind of look at their stats, it's kind of underwhelming. The offensive numbers, they're not terrible, but they're not exactly jumping off the page either. I would argue, here's the thing about Kakko and Lafreniere that I've noticed. Kakko is now in year 4. Lafreniere is now in year 3. Both of those guys, I truly believe, have become better players with every passing season, but it feels like, we're kind of just getting baby steps from year to year. And what we're looking for as Ranger fans is like a hop, skip, and a leap. You're really looking for that breakthrough, game or that breakthrough stretch of games, whatever it might be. You get excited sometimes because Lafreniere will have like a 6-game point streak, or maybe Kakko is looking good, whatever it might be. And yeah, I think at this point it's fair to say that Ranger fans thought that we would be getting a little bit more offensively from those guys. I think Ranger fans were also hopeful that they could use what they did in the playoffs last year when they were with the kid line with Philip and kind of use that as a springboard into this season. That was so much fun. I just loved watching that line, and we've gotten a reunion there as well. But I would argue that both have played better especially Kakko, both have played better this season than their point totals might suggest. Kakko was on the top line for a while with Kreider and Mika Zibanejad and really driving the play. Something that he's kind of learned over the years here seems to be that, hey, I'm a big, strong kid and I can use that to my advantage. When this guy has the puck, if he doesn't want to give it up, defenders have a lot of trouble taking it away from him. And that's very valuable. It can keep offensive zone possession times going. And right now, the Rangers are kind of in a spot where, the pieces don't quite fit perfectly because everybody loves the kid line. But when you go with the kid line, that's the third line, right? So you could do that, or you could put Kakko on the top line and Lafreniere on the third line, and that's an option as well. But then there's no kid line, and when you have the kid line together, then you've got guys like Jimmy Vesey and like Sammy Blais playing in the top six, which isn't ideal either. So they're kind of going back and forth with their alignments, and I've gone back and forth on it myself. I don't know the perfect alignment for this team right now. But the kid line, they didn't stand out as much in this most recent game, but the game before that, they looked really good. So I'm willing to see what they can do together. And like I said, that line was awesome in the playoffs. It was really a lot of fun watching them. And again, you just kind of hope that, the breakthrough game, the breakthrough stretch of games is eventually coming here this season at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I also mentioned goaltending, and we were getting more than what we expected. We got less than what we anticipated last year. But what can you tell us about just the Rangers and what that rotation has looked like in the last handful of years? I mean, when you have someone like Henrik Lundqvist who retires, and, there was a lot of storylines, let's say, with that, and even him moving on from the Rangers. But like, how do you then create a goalie system that is trying to move on and really usher in a new era of the Rangers?
Yeah, it is not lost on me just how lucky us Ranger fans are. I mean, you get about 15 years or whatever it was for Henrik Lundqvist, and now hopefully about the same amount of time for Igor Shesterkin. I mean, Vezina winner last year, just off to a tremendous start. One guy that I want to credit here is Benoit Allaire. I probably don't talk about him as much as I should on my podcast, but he's been the Ranger goalie for like an eternity. And whether you've got, all the talent in the world like Henrik Lundqvist or Igor Shesterkin, or, you're some undrafted kid like Alex Georgiev, he seems to do a nice job developing these goalies, working with them on the mental side of things. Every goalie that plays for the Rangers seems to, be all that they can be, so to speak. And I think we're seeing that with Igor Shesterkin. But yeah, I mean, it's just been a joy to watch Igor, just do what he's done over these past handful of seasons. And of course, last year, the breakthrough Vezina season. But Erica and Kraken fans, anybody who might be listening to this right now, if you get a chance, look up Igor Shesterkin's numbers, like in the KHL and some of these leagues he played in before he made it to the NHL. And I realize, those leagues are not as good as the NHL, but it's like video game numbers. It's just, it is absurd how good he was. And, obviously, like, I'm not a scout or anything, but I see numbers like that, and it's like, okay, this guy had like a 1 goals against average in the KHL. Like, there's no way he's going to come to the NHL and not be at least a good goalie. And he's been far more than that. And it's just been awesome. A little bit of a slow start this season by his own lofty standards, but he had a heck of a game against the Coyotes, really kept them in it when the Rangers were kind of sleepwalking. And I think he's ready to just, go into full-on Igor mode as we move forward here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I love also that you talked about goalie development. We didn't have young goalies or, the same kind of situation as going from like a perennial franchise goalie and then trying to figure out what that looks like next. Obviously, everything's brand new for us, but we did see that. I talked about it so much last year. Philip Grubauer never looked comfortable. And then one of the first change in the offseason that the Seattle Kraken made was to change goaltending coaches and to change that structure and style of development. And I mean, hey, we see what Martin Jones is doing. So very eager to see how that's going to play out as our two teams take the ice.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. And one other question, kind of changing gears a little bit here, but I'm on Cap Friendly quite a bit, and I was looking at the Kraken roster and who's making what. Something that I found very interesting is that nobody on the Kraken is making more than $5.5 million per season, but they have 11 players making between $3 million and $5.5 million. So that to me says that this is kind of like a deep team. It might not quite have like the true blue superstar, at least not yet. Maybe some of those young guys become that. But what can you say about that? How this roster has been built, and some of the depth that the Kraken appear to have, in year 2 here for the franchise.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because, I don't know if this is like full on Moneyball style hockey, but it's definitely Seattle Kraken on a discount. And even that I think has a negative connotation. Maybe saying it this way is the better way. Ron Francis has been very forthcoming with that the draft, the expansion draft that is, for the Seattle Kraken was going to be so different than what we saw for the Vegas Golden Knights. And by way of the Seattle Kraken having that different experience, he also wanted their development and trajectory to being a playoff team to be different. So having cap space has been something that Ron Francis has talked a lot about and continues to talk about, and making sure that there's some fluidity and that they can be malleable if and when they need to. I mean, even looking at our goaltending situation. So that's something that Ron Francis and the rest of the Seattle Kraken have really prepped us for as fans. I don't know how much we always listen, but because me, for one, I talk a lot about how, I mean, we didn't get to Keandre Miller, but even having a young defenseman or like a fast and smooth defenseman would be nice. I'd like to see it eventually, but there's a little bit of playing that long game, knowing that you do want to keep Matty Beniers or even a Shane Wright on a long-term contract. So you want to be able to kind of stagger out those contracts and be mindful of how much money you're giving. Maybe you don't go for, a Nazem Kadri for a centerman when you know you want to develop two centermen, just as an example. So it is definitely something that at times I'm like, give us more, but I'm still in Ron We Trust over here at Locked On Kraken.
For sure, for sure. I think, he's playing the long game, like you said, and I think you're probably in good hands over there. He's done a nice job. It's already a competitive team in year two here. I wanted to ask, I know we were talking a little bit off air, just about Climate Pledge Arena and what that atmosphere seems to be like. And you mentioned that you haven't had a chance to get there yet, but obviously you watch all these games and Seattle and some of the other sports, the NFL and soccer, very loud fan bases. What has it been like? Does that seem like it might be a fun arena to go to? Because there are some Ranger fans that do traveling. So as far as you can tell, what's it been like so far?
Oh yeah, it's must see. Not only is it the newest, but it's the most innovative. And the Lewicki brothers made it that way. Of course, the Seattle Kraken are there. The Seattle Storm for the WNBA have played basketball there and have already been a playoff team. So we're hoping that juju will rub off into the Kraken locker room. But they want this arena, they want this venue to be a must see, bucket list type venue for everything from sports to concerts to conferences. And they have prioritized, hence the name Climate Pledge, they have prioritized also not skimming on the experience. And it's so innovative the way they've done things, while also keeping in mind that the entertainment industry creates a lot of waste. They were just at in New York. They were here in New York at the Sports Business Journal conference, and they talked so much about the thought process that went into being carbon neutral. And I know that's not everyone's jam and vibe, but if you think about sports business and you think about the innovations that are required, or even really future proofing, in that we might start seeing regulations or expectations that this be a part of new buildings. Climate Pledge Arena has really set the bar, and they've done so not knowing that the Seattle Kraken would be there, but also hoping that the NBA would return. We've already seen preseason and exhibition games happen there. We've seen major concerts go there, and everything from having, I didn't even think about this, and I've been in the I've been underneath Madison Square Garden a million times, and you never think about how the traffic in the tunnel, even things like that. And so they have this massive tunnel that they built to create two-way traffic. So when the Seattle Kraken have to come in and set up, they're not in the way of whoever played the concert the night before or whatever the case is. And so I think from that perspective, as someone who does do a lot of research and writing in sports business, that is very exciting. But then you have what we call the twins. So anywhere in the arena, you can see the game, not just from the ice, because the seating goes from the ice level up. So, everyone's kind of dipping down. But you also have these massive, it's not one Jumbotron center ice, it's two. that are off center. And so you can see that from everywhere, which is awesome. There's a nice skywalk where if you walk past Climate Pledge Arena, you could, there's this big glass window. You could watch a game for free if you can sneak up to the window. There's just really some cool things. The locker rooms are absolutely fabulous. Every athlete that I've been able to talk to, whether from the Seattle Kraken or when I'm covering college basketball, WNBA basketball, they say that it's like nothing else, and that's exactly how the Leiweke brothers built it.
Yeah, I mean that's quite the endorsement for sure, and I got to get to some more NHL arenas to be sure, and I'm gonna add that one to the list. I haven't been to enough, so I wouldn't mind checking out a game in Seattle there at some point. But I figure, Erica, do you want to go ahead and throw out a prediction for this game? I mean, a final score or anybody that's going to score a goal for Seattle, whatever it might be. Anything you want to toss out there?
Yeah, I was looking at some of the stats, and I think we're pretty evenly matched going into this game, at least as of where the stats are. Coming into tonight's game, I generally speaking am thinking we're probably at about a 3-2 game. The Seattle Kraken have a lot to prove. And so I not just because I'm the host of Locked on Kraken, but because I really think they need it. I'm going to say the Seattle Kraken grind out a 3-2 win against the Rangers at Climate Pledge Arena and get us closer to being 500 at home. You got to do it. You got to be able to protect the house. And that's been something that we're still waiting on for Seattle. How about you, John?
Yeah, it's interesting because actually the Rangers have been a little bit better on the road than at home this season. I don't think the splits are like dramatic, but a little bit better record away from home. And with that said, I know both these teams are going to be rested. They both had 3 days off. I got the same final score, but I got to take my Rangers winning this one 3-2. I haven't really been able, when we do these crossovers, I haven't really been able to hit the final score all that great this season. But one thing I'm doing a pretty decent job at is picking a Ranger to score a goal. I picked Barclay Goodrow earlier this season, and he scored. I'm going to go with him again. He scored in this most recent game against the Coyotes, really kind of shifted the momentum of that game. Like I said, the Rangers were sleepwalking for about 35 minutes. He scored. They started skating. They started getting their game together. And on top of that, in the most recent game, and we'll see if this is still the case, but he got to move up to the Panarin Trocheck second line for the Rangers. So if that's the case, it just bodes well for his chances of scoring. But Barclay Goodrow, man, he's always just kind of Johnny on the spot for the Rangers and just seems to not an offensive juggernaut, but just seems to come through with a goal or a big play at times where the Rangers really need it. So there you go.
I love that. All right. I love it. So we're in agreement on the score. Just to throw out 2 names, and I talked about these guys. I've been talking about them a lot just because they are the impact players right now for the Seattle Kraken. I think we get a goal from Yanni Gourde and from Turbo Tanev. Their energy seems so like you said, Johnny on the spot. I love that because it's almost like their infectious high level energy is exactly what the Seattle Kraken need. And if this is going to be a tight game, those two really have to get going and be the heartbeat of the Seattle Kraken. So I hope both put one away. I'd love for one of them to be a game winner, but I guess we got to see how everything boils down in Climate Pledge Arena.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see. Gourde was one of those guys, like, again, not like an offensive superstar, but anytime the Rangers played the Lightning, he was one of those guys that just always scared me a little bit, So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Erica, this is a ton of fun. And can you let everybody know where they can find you and the show, like as far as where they can listen and find you on social media?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, John, for having me and for, as I say, squad casting it up here. But you can find me, Erica L. Ayala, at elindsay08 on Twitter and other social media platforms. So that's ELINDSAY08. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also just check it out right there. And then, of course, the show Locked on Kraken on all social platforms, including YouTube. And we really try to use that community tab, have some fun there. So appreciate that. But for our Kraken listeners, John, they should be familiar with where to find you because we've definitely been using some of your nows from last year's postseason. But remind us, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, and again, if you're on YouTube, right there, jchick17, and you can find the show on Twitter at LO_NY_Rangers, and of course, if you're listening to this podcast, you can find us there or any other audio streaming platform that exists, or of course, you can always watch on YouTube as well, and definitely looking forward to interacting with hopefully a couple new listeners here. We shall see.
Sounds good. Well, I think I might be in town again when the Kraken come to MSG, so maybe we'll do this again. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun, and yeah, I'm definitely up for a crossover anytime you are, Erica. And
Sounds great.
yeah, and so for Ranger fans and Kraken fans, thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.